Lo and behold, our buddy Knuckles gathered the pieces of their plane for them. So he's also a guy who will try to correct his mistakes and help others. All around, he's a lovable goofball with a strong sense of morality, even if he makes some iffy decisions from time to time. And these same elements of his personality are obvious in his subsequent appearances as well. For example, in the Sonic and Knuckles one-shot, Robotnik takes over Angel Island and makes it into a flying weapon. Needless to say, this poses a major problem for the Freedom Fighters, so Sonic and Tails return to the island to figure out what's going on. Knuckles, ever the professional at jumping to conclusions, thinks that they're part of the reason his home is a war zone right now. However, after a scuffle and a save from Tails, they manage to show him that the stars in the sky are all wrong. The island has moved without him noticing. Again, while Knuckles may be the type of guy who doesn't notice what's right in front of his face, he's also one who accepts these facts for what they are and is immediately willing to correct course. In fact, from here, Knuckles shows off his clever side. See, when he realizes that Robotnik has been siphoning energy from the Chaos Emerald, he quickly grabs it and breaks it. Robotnik, believing that the island will now crash in a knothole below, runs away, thinking he's victorious. However, Knuckles didn't really smash the emerald. Nah, he busted a fake he kept on him for this sort of occasion, so now he returns the real, undamaged emerald to its rightful place, and the island can soar back into the sky once more. So, when it comes to his job, Knuckles isn't just some dummy. He's capable of resourcefulness and intelligence. We even see him collecting more spare emeralds and helping this island's critters. So regardless of his flaws, he has this admirable sense of duty, and he puts in the work. At this point, Sonic even respects Knuckles enough to ask him to join the Freedom Fighters, but Knuckles rejects the offer. He has his own responsibilities. In following issues, Sonic's and Knuckles' rivalry becomes really funny. These two will lock eyes from across the room and just start going at each other for no real reason. And if there's trouble, it must be the other guy's fault. But somehow, this isn't obnoxious. No, their dialogue is consistently silly and snappy enough to totally undercut that potential element to this. And it's just funny watching their source of conflict go from Knuckles being paranoid of Sonic to Sonic being paranoid of Knuckles. By this point, they have what feels like a bickering brothers dynamic, constantly trying to one-up each other and ready at any moment to butt heads, all while still having an underlying respect for the other person. Which leads us to the Super Sonic vs. Hyper Knuckles special, a story that feels like the epitome of an issue where by its end, the characters have completely lost the plot. But while I genuinely don't know why these two are fighting like crazy, I can still somehow feel how much they know that they must. And that chaotic, colorful, and uncalled for dimensional carnage is what I'm here for. You want to talk about bickering brothers? This 2-page spread depicts the clash of Super Sonic and Hyper Knuckles as they pull hair and wind up for a knuckle sandwich. These dumb, stupid children, I love them. I can use my whirling fists like wheels and my feet like feet. Overall, this special, and Sonic and Knuckles' relationship in general, is an absolute blast, displaying Sonic's ego at its funniest and Knuckles' earnest annoyance at its peak. Just a wonderful time all around, and a dynamic that only helps to make both these characters a great deal more fun than they'd otherwise be. Still, Sonic has plenty of other friends to talk about. Now, most of them start off pretty simple as these gags or comedic commentators, but as things continue, there's some good development to be had with these guys, and the writers show that they aren't willing to let them stagnate. In many cases, this comes from simply acknowledging that, once you strip back the goofiness and puns and the fourth wall breaking gags, this world is awful. Robotnik has taken almost everything from these critters, their family, friends, and homes. At the end of the day, this is a story about a small group of rebels fighting a near hopeless fight. And the comic starts to focus more on how these scrappy kids are going to overcome these impossible odds. Now, that's not to say that the comic is overly serious about that at the moment, but most issues are now becoming a mix of a serious story and an incredibly silly one. Recurring adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog characters like Scratch, Grounder, and Coconuts eventually disappear entirely. And more, the comic attempts to tell more grounded narratives that last an entire issue. Beyond leaning into that underlying darkness of the setting, what these stories often allow for are welcome moments of clarity. Moments that humanize these silly little guys and show that they are affected by what's going on around them. Like Sonic's attempts to de-roboticize his Uncle Chuck and Mutsky, along with the sadness he feels from their separation. Or this guy trying to rescue his family from Robotnik's mind control and having to leave them behind. Actually, one particularly good example of this kind of thing comes in issue 18, where Sally's teacher and mentor Jalila passes away. This character has shown up pretty much out of nowhere, But it still works for me because it feels like we're getting a peek behind the curtain of the seemingly silly lives of these characters. A sudden, oh wait, moment, as Sally sits alone mourning her loss and Sonic arrives. He sits with her, comforts her, saying, "Tonight is almost yesterday, Sally, and there are many more tomorrows ahead." It's a genuinely sweet moment that manages to not only show us a different side of these characters, but also make me go, wow, I might actually enjoy these two as a pair. In fact, Sonic and Sally have quite a few cute moments together sprinkled throughout, though they usually have a bit more of a comedically flirty tilt to them. Honestly, to me, the comic hasn't only carried over the good parts of Sonic and Sally's relationship from Sad AM, it's improved upon them. But speaking of that show, Antoine, oh boy. In the show, Antoine is just, he's the worst. And this isn't some hot take. A lot of people hated him, and those fans carried that hatred over to the comic.
We had a character, Antoine, from the Saturday AM series. And I cannot begin to tell you how much mail we got from readers saying they absolutely hated the character, they wanted us to kill him off, that sort of thing.
The reason why Antoine sucked is simple. He was an annoying coward with no redeeming traits, at least none that I can remember. He's consistently the butt of every joke, but it's still not satisfying to see him suffer. His scream, it should be used as a fire alarm in apartment complexes worldwide to ensure a swift and safe evacuation. He's the primary focus of some of the show's worst comedy episodes, and I could go on and on, but his existence only makes the show worse. So what did the comic do? Well, the writers seemed to realize that leaving him the way he was wouldn't work. They had to do something else, and they did. Now, at first, he's a lot like his show counterpart, arrogant but ultimately useless. However, at this stage, he never gets much focus. He's more off to the side, unexceptional but unobtrusive. The lack of audible screaming also helps. Regardless though, when he is the butt of the joke, it's quick, snappy, and usually done in a manner that just plays up the way that he's out of his depth. Plus, the way the comic leans into his ego, it's actually really funny sometimes. But then, the 10th issue comes around. Here, Antoine takes his freedom-fighting friends on a ride in his hot air balloon. However, since he's somewhat ill-equipped for this adventure, some buzz bombers pop the balloon and it comes crashing down. Of course, the rest of the gang is frustrated with Antoine, since he was so confident in its usefulness in fighting Robotnik's forces. But Antoine's response to this is where things get interesting. Now, it might seem small at first, but he doesn't just brush this aside. He's genuinely upset and ashamed that he failed his teammates. He wants to prove to everyone that he isn't useless, and he is unwilling to give up on something he believes in. So yes, Antoine is sometimes stupid and overconfident, and he can have an inflated ego, but at the end of the day, he's willing to go out there, fight for his friends, and put himself on the line. And by learning from his mistakes, he ends up saving the freedom fighters single-handedly. He actually has a place and purpose on this team. Then there's issue 23 with the Volunteer. Here we begin by showing that yes, Antoine is still a scaredy cat who jumps at shadows on the walls. But then he goes outside and he sees a sad-looking Tails, who's upset that he lost Sonic's power ring because now he let the team down and he might get in trouble. Right away, this shows us that Tails doesn't just tolerate Antoine. He likes him at least enough that he'll talk to him about how he's feeling. And we soon see why, when Antoine quickly offers to retrieve the ring for Tails. But then Tails reveals where it is. Robotropolis, the heart of Robotnik's territory. Still, Antoine is unwilling to back down and says he's going to get it despite his clear discomfort. Now, Antoine doing this is undeniably stupid. He doesn't have the skill to survive alone in Robotnik's land, but it comes from a good place. He promised this kid he would help him, and no matter what, he's going to do it. This way, his one-sided rivalry with Sonic isn't just used to make him seem pathetic. It's used to push him to become braver and better, even if the steps he takes to get there are sometimes silly. From here, Tails excitedly tells Bunny what Antoine is up to, and she vanishes. We cut to Antoine sneaking around Robotropolis, narrowly avoiding death and disaster through mere chance. Or so it seems. Because yep, Bunny has been following him the whole way, protecting him from the shadows and making sure Antoine survives this mission. So now we're given more of a reason to like Bunny as well. The moment she hears one of her teammates might be in danger, she rushes to help them and handily defeats Robotnik's baddies. But she still wants to let Antoine feel like a hero, so she lets him have his moment with Tails. But he tells Tails something key. That was not brave. That was foolishness. Never do such a risk yourself, Tails. At first, it seems like Antoine might just be saying that because he's talking to a kid, with how he and Tails agree to keep this a secret. But then he turns to Bunny and thanks her and gives her a smooch, saying that this will be their secret. So Antoine wasn't as clueless as he seemed. He knew that Bunny saved him and that without her, he wouldn't have succeeded. And his ego isn't bruised by this. He's thankful that his friend was there for him and that he has a partner he knows he can trust in the future. Obviously, these are just two small stories, but they contextualize Antoine's actions in a way that make him far more likable and engaging even when he's just being used for show. And honestly, even the original miniseries, which happened a good while before any of this stuff, establishes his positive traits pretty well, giving him some nice moments with Sonic and playing up his ego in a way that makes him look competent since it's the help of Sally. Overall, Antoine stands as a prime example of how this comic can take the show's material and build something better without entirely changing what it is. What I mean is that Antoine is still Antoine, he's still a coward sometimes, and he still has a massive ego. The comic simply made it so that his cowardice was no longer his defining feature. If anything, his ego is now, and that ego compels him to fight despite his fear, and to help save his friends the best way he knows how. Then there's Bunny. While her strength was her biggest contribution to the team in the original show, now she feels like an even bigger powerhouse, and she's given a few moments to show why she's a fan favorite. The sweet girl who can also kick your butt halfway across Texas is just a fun contrast. But now with this Antoine story, she has an added layer to her character. And then there's the little romance bubbling with her thinking Antoine is really brave and, yeah baby, I'm here for it. And that's not all they do with Bunny. Now later we get to this chapter where we see Bunny's fear that her body will betray her and that she'll hurt her friends. Again, we're exploring other sides of these characters, digging into who they are, viewing them from multiple angles, and that's exactly what I want from a long-running, mostly episodic story like this. But this Antoine story's final main character is no slouch either, because Tails is great. The Michael Jordan of the Freedom Fighters, if you will. This little guy's got a lot going for him in these early issues. He's cute, lovable, eager to please, and genuinely hardworking, even if sometimes his ambition can get him into trouble. After all, even when he ate from the Mobian Tree of Wisdom, he still ended up needing to be rescued by Sonic. To Tails' dismay, this leads to him often being coddled by the rest of the Freedom Fighters. However, that doesn't mean that he's dead weight, and while his contributions are usually small or accidental, his dedication to the team always pays off in the long run, and his love and admiration for Sonic is incredibly endearing. Case in point, we have issue 20, where after a botched mission, Sonic turns invisible and everyone thinks he's dead. However, out of all the Freedom Fighters, Tails is the only one who refuses to believe it.
Dear Sonic, I know you're alive, so I left this note. We're on our way to Robotropolis to avenge your death. Your loyal pal, Tails. P.S. If you are dead, then pay no attention to this letter.
And hilariously, it's only because of this letter that Sonic is able to find and save his friends from Robotnik. So even if Tails isn't always directly useful, his loyalty to the group and his hero sure is. However, as time progresses, Tails starts to get some side stories all to himself, like when he saves the Sonic fan convention from Robotnik, defeats Pseudo-Sonic, or has his first encounter with Aquabot. While these victories may be smaller in scale, they're his. More than most interpretations of the character, the comic really leans into Tails being a little kid, and it's the act of consistently watching him rise to the occasion and do his best that makes this version of his character so compelling. Just seeing that Tails really is becoming a hero, like Sonic. He's even got the witty one-liners down. Work? Do I look like a slave?
Actually, you look like 5 slaves, but who's counting?
Wait, what? It also helps that Tails' desire to be treated like a grown-up results in some really wild stories. For example, in issue 28 and 29, Tails, on the hunt for adventure, arrives on this island where he falls in love with a red fox named Fiona. The two really hit it off, but then it's revealed that Fiona is actually one of Robotnik's bots. While Tails succeeds in escaping Robotnik's trap, you gotta feel bad for the kid. After all, he would have been able to live it up with the perfect woman if only she'd been waterproofed. Thus, Tails leaves the rusted husk of the robot love of his life behind, a monument to their brief yet incredibly formative encounter. Some say Robo-Fiona is still out there on that island, crying, alone, wishing that, in some other dimension and some other time, things could have been different. The Archie Sonic comic is truly a tragedy. From here, Tails continues his submarine journey. He meets the Down Under and 40 Fathoms Freedom Fighters, fights Octobot and Crocbot, recounts his adventures as Captain Super Foxman, the mutant cyborg clone, and finds out that he's the chosen one of destiny. But that's a tale for another time. Finally, he helps put an end to one of Robotnik's schemes. Tails was right, but only partially. He can do a lot to help, but he can't do it alone. He needs a team to be there with him if he's really gonna make a change in the world at large. It's a cute little arc for him, and one that endeared me to his character just a little more. But this expansion of the world and its characters doesn't stop there. Nah, the comics got plenty of its own ideas, and sometimes those ideas are, what is that thing? Well, that's an exceptionally versatile Evolvinoid. It was created from the DNA of Robotnik and Sonic, made by the Doctor with a single directive: destroy your father, aka Sonic the Hedgehog. However, over the course of a single issue, it transforms multiple times and ultimately achieves enlightenment, realizing that Robotnik is its true limitation and that he must be destroyed. So it fries Robotnik, then turns to Sonic, ready to destroy him too. But Sonic talks it down, saying that its real limitation is its programming, and it must go against that programming to truly break free from its restraints. This way it gains independent thought and evolves further, entering the endless expanse of space. It's a story that by the end feels pretty out there, but the following story takes this even further. Because as it turns out, Robotnik wasn't murdered by Eve. Instead, he was sent to an alternate dimension where he meets Robotnik. No, not that one. This one. Robotnik was defeated by his Sonic, and in a last-ditch effort to preserve what was left, downloaded his robot soul into a satellite station he'd built. Unfortunately for him, though, at the time, it was functionally useless. Now, Robotnik spends his days wallowing in space, waiting for his inevitable power failure. However, our Robotnik won't have any of that, and encourages him to keep up the fight. The war isn't over for either of them, and as thanks for reinvigorating his cold, dead heart, Robotnik sends our Robotnik back home to the planet Mobius, where everyone is gonna die, because Robotnik ensured that in the event of his demise, Operation Wasteland would commence, wherein his robot army would raze the land to ash and dirt. Because if Robotnik can't have this world, then no one can. Our heroes are so caught off guard that they don't even know what to do, until at the last minute they're saved by a familiar voice. Robotnik takes so much sick pleasure letting Sonic know how much the freedom fighters' lives are in his hands. And to rub it in, he lets them leave, stating that, "Next time will be of my own choosing, Hedgehog, when you least expect it. There's been no gain, there's been no loss. We shall live to fight another day." Speaking of the madman himself, Robotnik. When he's not being terrifying, he is hysterical. The deliciously evil dictator who hates laughing, singing, reading, animals, dancing, plants, religion, and even women. Everything about him is icky and gross in just the right way. I mean, my man drinks and sweats 10W40. Even committing federal offenses such as stealing Sonic fan mail from the US Postal Service, a truly heinous crime. But hey, that's what makes him a supervillain on the cutting edge. And man, does he have fun being terrible. In fact, it sometimes makes it easy to forget just how horrible a person he really is. This stand-in for all things greedy and destructive, decimating the environment not only for his own gain, but because he enjoys watching others suffer. He's a villain who's an absolute joy to sit with, especially if, like me, you read his dialogue with his sad AM voice in mind. Sonic the Hedgehog has been a thorn in my side, but girls just want to have fun. Then there's the way he plays off other characters, his robots, his poor nephew Snively. Man, he is such a monster to everyone, and I love him for it. His henchmen are just as fun, from his badniks who have a ton of personality to his SWAT bots that know that when Sonic is around, it's best to just call it quits and off yourself out of sight. It seems Robotnik requires all his henchmen to refer to him by over-the-top evil titles, and just seeing Robotnik rally his troops or have a company picnic is inherently funny. Snively is great too. His best outing for me is easily when he accidentally gains full control of Robotnik's forces when the big man is lost in the void. Suddenly, all of his bottled up ego is on full display as he starts wearing Robotnik's clothes and talking all high and mighty. It's really funny how bold he gets. Even better is the fact that while Snively shares his uncle's intellect, he is so incompetent and brash in his execution that he almost destroys the planet in a single day, with the freedom fighters deciding to set Robotnik free to reverse Snively's screw-up, since having to deal with a calculating dictator is better than dealing with a cataclysmic moron. The best part? Robotnik decides to spare Snively's life so that he can make him miserable for all that's alive.
202, what's that? Dude, that's top 4. No, that's top 5. Dude. Oh my fucking god. I don't know if I'm like over the moon or I'm about to fucking cry. I've never been this proud over something so fucking stupid. Oh my god. Dude.